Um, Good evening. Apologies for the delay in starting. I never realized Sri Tapan Ghosh ji will be so much in demand here in Chennai. It's literally from the time he's landed up yesterday afternoon. It's been a very packed session for him. Literally, so many people have been wanting. Even now, we just finished a meeting with Sri Gurumurthy ji and straight coming here. So apologies again, once again. Request all of you to just keep your mobile phones in silent mode, please. I would request Sri Tapan Ghosh ji and Sri GP Srinivasan ji to please come to the dais. Okay. I would request Sri R. Vaidyanathan, Director Bhavans Chennai Kendra, to kindly please give the mementos to Sri Tapan Ghosh ji and Sri GP Srinivasan ji. Respected Sri Tapan Ghosh ji, Sri GP Srinivasan ji, respected dignitaries of the dais, brothers and sisters, it gives me great pleasure in welcoming all of you to the 9th Sri P. A. Ramakrishnan Memorial Lecture. We have always strived to invite the very best of the intelligentsia, starting with Colonel Anil Athale ji, Dr. C.I. Isaac, Sri Michel Danino, Sri Rajiv Srinivasan ji, Sri R. Vaidyanathan ji, Professor R. Vaidyanathan ji, Sri Bharat Karnar ji, Sri Sushil Pandit ji, and this year is also no exception. We have Sri Tapan Ghosh ji, who has himself described himself as an uncompromising Hindu nationalist of West Bengal. So, and it has also given me great pleasure in welcoming Sri GP Srinivasan ji, who's the journalist in the Hindu Voice and a very close friend of mine. And we have had a lot of discussions over a period of several years on vital issues concerning our nation. And it was Sri GP Srinivasan ji who was responsible for facilitating this meeting, bringing Sri Tapan Ghosh ji here. And he has taken the trouble to come drive all the way from Trichy today in spite of a very severe back pain. So I'm really grateful. And regarding this lecture, I don't want to go too much into the details, but what I would like to say is why should all of us be worried about the situation in West Bengal? We are all here in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, oasis of peace and tranquility, very peaceful situation. We are all very happy, very comfortable. Just to go down the memory lane, a couple of years back, we invited Sushil Pandit ji from the Kashmiri Hindu Pandit who came here and gave a really heart-wrenching speech about the how nearly 500,000 Kashmiri Pandits were literally, after being raped, ravaged, and looted, were ethnically cleansed and thrown out of their homes, and even today they have not been able to get back. After 27 years. So we start from Kashmir, the fire that has started from Kashmir. Now we go down. You see, actually, it has engulfed West Bengal, and it is slowly spreading in other parts of our country. And we normally say very, to signify the unity and integrity of our country, we say Kashmir to Kanyakumari, Kashmir to Kanyakumari. But what is the reality? Reality is in Kashmir, we are nowhere. There is not even a 0.1% of our community over there. And in Kanyakumari, it is not even worth the piece of paper it is written on. Then you go this side in Bengal, you see the situation is so bad. Shri Tapan Ghosh ji will talk a lot about it. I don't want. And then you go to the west, Kerala is also, which is our native home state, is extremely bad. So I think we have to really, first step towards solving the problem is awareness. And we have to be aware, and then only we can find solutions to the problems. So, and there is another historical significance to the seminar. my father spent nearly 25 years of his prime part of his life in Calcutta. He always used to consider him as a half Bengali, and his foundation for whatever he did, whether it was in his business career or in his social life, was laid at Calcutta, starting his work with the Vivekananda Rock Memorial, working with late Sri Eknath Ranade ji, and he always considered himself as a half Bengali. He used to always be very proud of that fact. And but for the terrible Naxalite movement that was happening there in the 60s and 70s, he would have probably started his industry there. So there is I be a very I mean the one more reason I'm very happy to have this seminar, to have Shri Tapan Ghosh ji here, is that it's really, it's really pays a very big tribute to my father by having this seminar. So now I would request Shri G.P. Srinivasan ji to give the introductory remarks, and then Shri Tapan Ghosh ji would give his enthroning lecture. Thank you.
இல்லை நிற்கலாம், ஒன்றும் ப்ராப்ளம். தமிழில் பேசலாமா இல்லை தமிழ்? ஓகே. Since our guest does not know Tamil, so I wish to speak in English, no problem. So all of us can understand English also and Tamil. So it's a great honor to be here to attend this ninth felicitation of Sri Ramakrishnan ji. When Anant Narayanan requested me to get in touch with Tapan Ghosh ji, I used my contacts, and he agreed immediately, and the next day his confirmation came. That's how it started. So I happened to be here because of that. Other than that, I don't think there is any great credentials for me other than sharing the same knowledge which you all have. Much more knowledge. We're all veterans. There are great veterans, writers, Hindu activists, journalists, everybody is here. So I'm among one of you, and so I take pleasure in introducing Sri Tapan Ghosh ji for this program. There are three basic things I want to tell. I was working in NTPC way back in 1980s. In West Bengal, there's a barrage called Farakka barrage. Huge influx of Bangladeshis used to come. We had a watchtower 40, 50 feet high. My security guard used to take me there. Armed BSF used to be there. In spite of that, they used to come. In the night, they used to come. The day, they used to come. They come in batches, 25, 30, 50. Everybody used to come. We had 20, 30 foot high walls. Over that, fencing was there. And they used to migrate, and our people used to show me with the help of binoculars, their watchdogs. They used to steal the equipment. They used to steal the copper wire. They used to steal everything. They used to break the wagons that carry coal for the power plant. And sometimes they used to throw some sort of hammer into the, what do you call as conveyor belt, and break the conveyor belt. It takes several months to repair it, and there's huge power outages. All because of miscreants, we are not able to control it, and the government policy used to help them to come and settle in West Bengal, which Arun Shourie has written as Lebenstraum policy, Greater Bangladesh and all that, which you all know, you have read so much. So when you see it practically, you used to feel jittery. There is a training center in it's called National Power Thermal Plant, NET training center, where you used to train the engineer trainees. One boy came from, I think, Velachery. One Sairam, he came. For the first time he came, and he thought it is just like Chennai. So he landed in the middle of the night. He took a cycle rickshaw and he started going up. And three dakus, thugs, they came from West Bengal. They tied him. They removed his shirt and they tied him on the track. They put him on the track. They tied him with the help of his shirt and left him in the track in the hot sun for 4-5 hours. He was lying in the track. Hundreds of trains used to go. On that day, there was no train. This fellow escaped. Actually, this happened. Then somehow one of the thugs came back and untied him after 4 hours. And this fellow came to the NTPC hostel, and there was a huge hue and cry, and all the boys started pelting stone. There was a huge ruckus. And there was an industrial relation problem because of this. So the director of NTPC had to come from Delhi, and it became a very big issue. So these sort of things keep on happening. Are we a secure state? Are we having any security for our own people? That's a basic question. There's no security. I wonder how Tapan Ghosh survives in West Bengal. We have to appreciate their mental tenacity and strength and the courage to fight back. We are not facing such type of situations anywhere in Tamil Nadu, except some pockets like Ambur, Vaniyambadi, or some places where you can expect this type of problems. So yesterday I was going through some basic research for this program. Since the time is 10 to 15 minutes, I limit with what you might not know. Certain things which I want to share with you. In 1989, December 25th, the Berlin Wall fell. The Berlin Wall fell on December 25th, 1989. Many of you may know the reasons, many of you may not know the reasons. How the mighty USSR fell. How Vatican and the Catholic establishment and America united to break this mighty USSR. And now Russia wants to take revenge on America. That's what they're doing. For the misdeeds of Ronald Reagan and the successive policies of the Republicans and the successive policy of Vatican to bring down the Soviet Union, now they're going to take it back. Soon we are going to see a world war in the next few days or few months in the South Korean peninsula or wherever it is. That's going to happen. So India is wedged between many great forces. On the one side, we have got the Catholic liberation theology that is working very deep in India. On the other hand, we have the Salafi Islamic groups that are working in India. And north, we are wedged between two great Islamic powers, or nuisance powers. One is Pakistan and another is Bangladesh. And above is the Red Terror, China. All these forces are united. And they have got a single purpose in decimating India. Let us not be very soft on this issue. Many of you may be from intelligence or army or navy, whatever it is. You know much better about these things. So basic, I asked many army people, including generals, some of my friends are generals, why the mighty Soviet Union came down. Can you tell me a single reason? What is the ideological reason? Or how can a mighty country fall down? Nobody was able to answer. At last, by my own research, I found out the reason. All the great countries of Europe that came under the communist umbrella were tied upon only one single factor, that is, they made an agreement, labor agreement, based on labor unions sort of things. All the countries were united on a single platform, based on some labor union agreements. Once that agreement was broken, all the countries went apart. This is a basic thing. And they know the basic thing, how to break a nation. East Timor, or why they invaded Grenada, all these things you know. So why this Bangladesh? Bangladesh is exporting people, population into India. And they are continuously harassing people. Pakistan is doing the same thing. Now individuals as Tapan Ghosh and many others are fighting. Hindu Samiti has been doing a great work. But officially, how are you going to take a policy? How are you going to pressurize our government to do something? On one side, there has been a radical reduction of Hindu population all over India, and more so in Bangladesh, West Bengal. From 78, it has come to 70. Recently, the RSS had made a big statement from Coimbatore. Sri Mohan Bhagwatji issued a statement to Mamata Banerjee to see that prevent this fall of Hindu population. From 78 to 70, in other countries it would have caused a revolution and the government would have been thrown. Here it's still tolerated. What is happening? Where the Hindu population coming down? These are certain basic issues which should take hard look, and Sri Tapanji will talk about the de-Hinduization of Bengal in a very detailed way. I want to share few things only with you which are very critical. I asked you about the fall of the former Soviet Union. Yuri Bezmenov, Confessions of a Communist Spy. It is available in the YouTube. Yesterday only I went through it. 1993, he made a confession how the communists have penetrated India, how they captured all these so-called journalists, so-called opinion makers, publishers, editors, actors, educationists, professors, MPs. He has made an open confession in YouTube. It's available, all of you can see. and they are doing the same thing with US also. So this Yuri Bezmenov Confessions of 1993 has been uploaded very recently, I think. So when it comes to the decimation of Hindu population in West Bengal, it started with the first Sari Bari killings. Am I correct? And the next one was Marichapi. 60,000 Bangladeshi Hindus wanted to come into India. They were all shot dead. Hundreds of them died in the Indian borders by Jyoti Basu government. Nobody knows it. There's only a small book available on Marichapi killings. Bengali Hindus came into India and they were shot dead. Ananda Margis, they were killed in 1982. Nanur in 2000. And Nandigram, March 14, 2017. So there is a massive genocide of Hindus going on in all over the border states, and this should be stopped. According to Yuri, what is his name? Yuri Bezmenov, there are 5 stages where they do it, how they do it. So Muslims are partly communist, am I correct? Influenced by Leninist Maoist ideology. And there are 4 stages. They want to demoralize the population, majority population, and the next they try to normalize it, and third destabilization process, and they generate public opinion using media, TV and others, and finally, communists kill communists. The gangsters go and kill all the intellectuals, scholars, doctors. This is what happened in Vietnam. This is what happened in China. So they create a crisis, and the process, it goes on. Each process takes 20 to 30 years. This is what Bezmenov confesses in the TV. And the stabilization, when you try to destabilize it, there's a mass execution or mass evacuation of people. Once that goes, the liberal Marxists are killed by gangsters, conservatives. This is what happened in China. This is what happened in Vietnam. So finally, it will take minimum 15 to 20 years to reverse each of this process. Kindly go through it, 1.5 hours, 2 hours video. I'm only succinctly putting it. And he's telling India is at war. And India is not recovering. See, Indians are in deep coma. And it's called deep state. This deep state, it's a frozen state, like minus 273 degrees, where all these cells of Marxism operate throughout India. It operates through Islam, it operates through so many other forces in so many names. He gives all this explanation. You can go through it. I don't want to read it. In 1983, this man's name was changed into Thomas Schumann, and he's giving a detailed class in some Stanford or some other places. Now finally, all this Jallikattu, separate nation theory, anti-Hindu agitation, these Dravidian movements, caste agitation, pseudo-Hindu rights, women rights, quota system, liberal things, are all foisted by these forces in different fronts. And if you are able to see the forces at work, you should be able to form a common platform and have a broad spectrum antibiotic. Now I leave you to Sri Tapan Jose for enlightening us further. Thank you.
Firstly, namaskar to all, and I pay my tribute to late P.A. Ramakrishnan, on whose memory this lecture is being organized. And I am extremely thankful to Ananta Narayanji for inviting me to this august assembly. And also my thanks to Srinivasanji. I am not very well and fluent in English, therefore I will read a written speech, and after that, if necessary, I can respond to your questions or something. Today, I will tell you 2 sides of the story of contemporary Bengal. On one side, I will narrate how the Hindus face existential crisis, and I will tell you heart-wrenching stories of the sufferings and persecution at the hands of an ever aggressive Muslim population. On the other hand, I will tell you how almost a decade back, me and my young compatriots decided to take direct action on the ground about this threat while forming this my organization Hindu Samhati. Let me begin by describing the nature of current crisis in Bengal. Hindus in Bengal and many parts of eastern India today are facing a looming disaster. Slowly but steadily, they face a complete extinction, and there is no other way to say this more directly and honestly than this. There is relentless Islamic aggression and assault that is also very well funded and organized. On a daily basis, Hindu religious practices are being attacked, religious processions and pujas are attacked in many corners of Bengal, be it by destruction of our temples or illegal forceful occupation of religious lands, encroachment of funeral ghats, cremation grounds, cows stealing and illegal slaughter, or sometimes direct murder of priests and temple personnel. Even worse is the condition of the Hindu women and minor girls, and I can speak for hours narrating horror stories of their sufferings and humiliation day in and day out in rural or even suburban towns. This includes kidnapping and forced marriage by Muslim men or by deceitful love jihad, sexual assault during communal carnages and rape in many cases. In addition to the agony of this social aggression, there is an economic impact of growing Islamization of Bengal. This includes targeted destruction of home and property, vandalization of shops and vehicles that are means of livelihood for poor Hindu families during communal riots or Islamic religious procession. Then there are many cases of land grabbing by organized mafia that are often led by Muslim criminals and smugglers that enjoy political patronage. Many times, government land marketed for public works, banks of rivers or lakes are encroached upon, and mosques are built by illegal immigrants with connivance of Islamic criminal mafia with the goal to displace the nearby Hindus. All these factors have caused a huge change in the demography where hapless Hindus are forced to flee their ancestral lands after being completely surrounded by Muslims, and many villages that didn't have significant Muslim population during partition have now become completely Hindu-less in last 7 decades of Islamic aggression. However, political indifference is a critical factor, as none of this could happen without the implicit and often explicit support of politicians and administration. As is true for large parts of India, Hindus do not form vote banks, but Muslims do so under strict religious diktat, and their effort to form a vote bank and influence politics is very well organized and systematic via local mosques and religious leadership, that is mullahs and Maulvis. A large part of the current political scenario wherein politicians and administration are indifferent to the plight of Hindus is the communist history of Bengal that are directly responsible for suppression of legitimate Hindu grievances while appeasing the Muslim population. The communists in Bengal, as in most parts of India where they hold power, have systematically ignored, tolerated and often promoted Islamic fundamentalism in order to stay in power, that is to appease their Muslim vote bank. The current TMC government is merely following such communist policy very effectively. So while the communists have generously promoted the spread of fundamentalism by establishing madrasas and mosques mushrooming all over rural Bengal, the current TMC government is only continuing the course by providing economic assistance to imams and muezzins, or by providing huge economic assistance to only Muslim students. Unfortunately, for the Hindus of Bengal, this patronage is not limited to the ordinary